Chapter 8. The Beginning of the End. I had wangled permission to stay in H for the summer term too. Instead of staying in the house, we were now almost always in the garden by the river. The Japanese, who incidentally had lost the wrestling match badly, was gone, as was the Tolstoy discipline. Demian kept a horse and rode untiringly every day. I was often alone with his mother. At times I was surprised at the peacefulness of my life. I had been so long accustomed to being alone, to practicing resignation, to tussling sternly with my torments, that those months in H seemed to me like a dream island on which I could live in comfortable enchantment, devoting myself exclusively to beautiful, pleasant things and ideas. I sensed that it was a foretaste of the new, higher society we were discussing, and occasionally I became very sad over that happiness because I was well aware it couldn't last. I wasn't meant to exist in the lap of plenty and ease. I needed torment and persecution. I felt that someday I would awaken from those beautiful images of love and once more be alone, all alone in the cold world of the others, where there was only solitude or struggle for me, not peace or participation. Then I nestled into Lady's Eve nearness with rebounded tenderness, glad that my destiny still bore those beautiful, calm features. The summer weeks went by quickly and easily. The term was already finishing. It was almost time to say goodbye. It would have been wrong for me to think about it, and I didn't. Rather, I clung to those lovely days as a butterfly clings to the honey flower. That had been my time of happiness, the first fulfilling time in my life, and my acceptance into the group. What would come next? I would once again fight my way through, suffer for launching, dreams, dreams be alone. On one of those days, I was so greatly overcome by that premonitionary feeling that my love for Lady Eve suddenly flared up painfully. My God, just a little while and I wouldn't be seeing her, wouldn't be hearing her firm, lovable steps in the house, wouldn't be finding her flowers on my table. And what had I accomplished? I had dreamed and cradled myself in comfort. Instead of winning her, instead of fighting for her and seizing her to be mine forever, everything she had ever told me about true love now came back to me. 100 subtle words of exhortation, 100 gentle allurements, perhaps for promises. What had I done with it all? Nothing, nothing. I took a stand in the middle of my room, summoned up every ounce of consciousness, and thought about Eve. I wanted to gather all the strength of my soul so that she would feel my love, so that she would be compelled to me to come. She had to come and long for my embrace until she won it. My kisses must burrow insatiably into her ripe, loving lips. I stood there harnessing my powers until a chill spread through me, starting with fingers and feet. I felt strength emanating from me. For a few moments, something inside me contracted firmly and tightly, something bright and cool. For a moment, I had the sensation of carrying a crystal in my heart. I knew it was myself. The coldness reached my breast. When I awoke from the frightening exertion, I sensed that something was on its way to me. I was dead with exhaustion, but I was prepared to see Eve walk into the room, ardent and rapturous. Now a clatter of hoofs hammered up the long street. It sounded close and metallic. All at once it stopped. I leapt to the window below. Demian was dismounting. I ran downstairs. What's going on, Demian? I hope nothing has happened to your mother. He didn't listen to what I was saying. He was very pale, and from both sides of his forehead, sweat was running down his cheeks. He tied the reins of his horse and was hot from running. To the garden fence he took my arm and walked down the street with me. Have you already heard something? I didn't know a thing. Demian squeezed my arm and turned his face to me with a dark, sympathetic, odd look. Yes, my friend, it has started. I'm sure you know about our very strained relations with Russia. What? Are we at war? I never thought it would happen. He spoke quietly, even though there was no one else around. It hasn't been declared yet, but the war is on. Rely on it. Since that other time, I haven't bothered you about this business, but in the meantime, I have seen new omens 3 times, and so it won't be the end of the world or an earthquake or a revolution. It will be a war. You will see how popular it will be. People will be in raptures. Even now, everybody is looking forward to a scrap. That's how dull their life has become. But you will see, Cynthia, this is just the beginning. Maybe it will turn into a big ball, a very big ball. But even that is only the beginning. New times are dawning, and for those who cling to the old, the new will be horrible. What are you going to do? I was bewildered. It all still sounded strange and improbable to me. I don't know. And you? He shrugged his shoulders. As soon as they announce mobilization, I'll be in the army. I'll be a lieutenant. Yes, I don't know a thing about it. Yes, it was one of my ways of adapting. As you know, I have never wanted to be conspicuous outwardly, and I have always preferred to do a little too much in order to be correct. I think that in a week I will already be at the front. For the love of God! Now, my boy, you must not get sentimental about it. Basically, of course, I won't get much pleasure out of ordering my men to fire at living people, but that will be secondly. Now, each of us will get caught up in the big wheel. You too. You will definitely be drafted. And your mother, Tibia, only at that point did I recall what had been going on 15 minutes earlier, how the world had changed. I had been concentrating all my strength in order to conjure up the sweetest image, and now destiny was suddenly staring at me in a new form from a menacingly horrid mask. My mother, oh, we don't need to worry about her. She's safe, safer than anyone else in the world is today. You love her that much that you knew Demian? He laughed cheerfully and unconstrainedly. My little friend, of course, I knew. No one has yet called my mother Lady Eve unless he was in love with her. By the way, what was going on? Didn't you summon her on me today? Yes, I called. I called for Lady Eve. She sensed it. She sent me off to see you at once. I had just told her the news about Russia. We turned back. Not saying much more, he reunited with his horse and mounted. It was only when I was upstairs in my room that I noticed how exhausted I was from Demian's message and even more from my previous exertion. But Lady Eve had heard me. With my thoughts, I had reached her heart. She would have arrived herself, except that how odd all this was, and basically how beautiful. Now a war was upon us. Now all that we knew, had talked about so often was to start happening. And Demian had known so much about it in advance. How strange it was that now the current of the world was no longer going to flow somewhere past us, that it was now suddenly moving right through our hearts, that adventurous and wild destinies was summoning us. And now or soon the moment would come when the world needed us, when it would be transformed. Jimmy was right. One shouldn't get sentimental about it. The only peculiar thing was that now I would be experiencing destiny, usually such a personal matter, in common with so many others, with the whole world. Good. I was prepared. When I walked through town that evening, there was a hubbub of great excitement in every nook and cranny. Everywhere the world war. I arrived at Lady Eve's house. We had supper in the little garden house. It was the only guest was I. No one said a word about a war. Only very late, shortly before I left, did Lady Eve say, "My dear Sinclair, you summoned me today. You know why I didn't come myself, but don't forget, now you know how to call me, and whenever you need someone who wears the mark, call again." She stood up and walked ahead of us through the twilight of the garden. The mysterious woman strode, tall and regal, among the silent trees, and above her head shone the numerical stars, small and delicate. I am reaching the end. Things took their swift course. Soon war was declared, and Demian, strangely unfamiliar looking in the uniform with the silver grey coat, departed. I escorted his mother back to her home. Soon I, too, said goodbye to her. She kissed my lips and clasped me to her breast for a moment, while her large eyes blazed into mine close and intensely. And all people were like brothers. They had the fatherland and honor in mind, but it was destiny into whose unveiled face they were all gazing for a moment. Young men left their barracks and boarded trains, and on many faces I saw a mark, not ours, a beautiful dignified mark signifying love and death. I too was hugged by people I had never seen, and I understood and gladly reciprocated. It was an intoxication in which they acted that way. They weren't in harmony with their fate. But that intoxication was holy. It was caused by their all having taken that brief, rousing look into the eyes of destiny. It was nearly winter by the time I was sent to the front. In the beginning, despite the sensations aroused by the constant gunfire, I was disappointed in everything. Earlier, I had thought a lot about why it was so extremely unusual for a person to be able to live for an ideal. Now I saw that many people, all in fact, are capable for dying for an ideal. Only it must not be a personal, freely chosen ideal, but one held in common and taken over from the other people. But as time went by, I saw that I had underestimated people. Even though military service and their shared danger made them so much alike, nevertheless I saw many, the living and the dying, approach the acceptance of destiny in a splendid manner, not only while attacking, but all the time. Many of them, very many, had a steady, distant, most obsessed gaze that is not directed at goals but indicates complete surrender to the prodigious. No matter what they choose to believe and think, they were ready, they were useful, the future could be formed from them. And no matter how inflexibly the world was clamouring from war and heroism, honor, and other outmoded ideals, no matter how remote and unlikely every voice that apparently spoke up for humanity sounded, all of that was merely superficial, just as the question of the external and political aims of the war remained superficial. Deep down, something was evolving, something like a new humanity, because I could see many people, and a number of them died alongside me, who had gained the emotional insight that hatred and rage, killing and destroying, were not linked to the specific objects of that rage. No, the objects, just like the aims, were completely accidental. Those primal feelings, even the wildest of them, weren't directed against the enemy. Their bloody results were merely an outward materialization of people's inner life, the split within their souls, which desired to rage and kill, destroy and die, so that they could be reborn. A gigantic bird was fighting its way out of the egg, and the egg was the world, and the world had to fall to pieces. One early spring night, I was standing guard in front of the farmhouse we had occupied. A listless wind was blowing in capricious gusts. Armies of clouds were riding across the high heavens of Flanders. Somewhere behind them was a hint of moon. That whole day I had already been restless. Somebody was nagging at me. Now, on my post in the darkness, I was thinking lovingly of the images of my earlier life, of Lady Eve, of Demian. I was leaning against a poplar and gazing at the agitated style in which the bright areas, mysteriously shifting, were soon transformed into large, radiating series of images. By the unusual slowness of my pulse, by the insensitivity of my skin to wind and rain, by the sparks of my inner alertness, I felt that a guide was near me. In the clouds, I could see a great city from which poured millions of people who spread out in swarms over wide stretches of countryside. Into their midst there stepped a powerful divine figure, sparkling in stars in its hair, tall as a mountain chain, with the features of Lady Eve. Into that figure, as if into a gigantic cave, the columns of people vanished and were lost from view. The goddess crouched down on the ground, the mark on her forehead gleaming brightly. A dream seemed to overpower her. She shut her eyes, and her huge face was distorted with pain. Suddenly she screamed shrilly, and from her forehead shot stars, many thousands of radiant stars which flung themselves across the black sky in splendid arcs and semicircles. One of the stars whizzed directly toward me with a bright sound. It seemed to be seeking me out. Then, with a roll, it exploded into a thousand sparks. It yanked me upward and threw me to the ground again. With a thunderclap, the world collapsed above me. I was found near the poplar, covered with earth and wounded in many places. I was lying in a cellar. Cannons were lowering overhead. I was lying on a cart, bumping over empty fields. Most of the time I slept or was unconscious. But the more soundly I slept, the more violently I felt that something was drawing me onward, that I was following a power that had gained mastery over me. I was lying in a stable on straw. It was dark. Someone had stepped on my hand, but my inner self wanted to move on. I felt a stronger pull away from there. Again, I was lying in a cart and later on a stretcher or ladder. I had a stronger and stronger feeling that I was being intentionally conveyed somewhere. All I felt was the urge to get there finally. Then I reached my destination. It was night time. I was fully conscious. I had just still felt that pull and urge in me powerfully. Now I was lying in a large room, bedded down on the floor, and I had the feeling that I was where I had been summoned to. I looked around. Right next to my mattress was another one, with someone on it who was leaning forward and looking at me. He had a mark on his forehead. It was Maximian. I was unable to speak, and he too was unable or unwilling to. He just looked at me. On his face was the glow from a light bulb that hung above him on the wall. He smiled to me. For an infinitely long time he kept looking into my eyes. Slowly he moved his face closer to me until we were almost touching. Sinclair, he said in a whisper. I signaled to him with my eyes that understood him. He smiled again, almost as if in sympathy. My young friend, he said with a smile. Now his mouth was right next to mine. He continued speaking loudly. Can you still recall Franz Cromer? He asked. I winked at him, and I managed to smile too. Young Sinclair, pay attention. I'm going to have to depart. Perhaps you will need me again sometime to protect you from trauma or something else. If you call me, then I will no longer come riding so crudely on a horse or on a train. Then you will have to listen within yourself and you will notice that I am inside you. Understand? And one more thing. Lady Eve said that if things were ever went badly for you, I was to give you the kiss from her that she sent along with me. Close your eyes, Sinclair. I closed my eyes obediently. I felt a light kiss on my lips, on which there was always a little acclimation of blood that wouldn't decrease. And then I fell asleep. In the morning, I was awakened. I was to be bandaged. When I was finally properly awake, I turned over quickly toward the neighboring mattress. A stranger was lying on it, someone I had never seen. The bandaging hurt. Everything that has been done to me since then has hurt. But whenever I find the key at times and descend all the way into myself where the images of destiny slumber in the dark mirror, I need only lean over the black mirror to see my own image, which now exactly looks like him, my friend and guide.